Next, we go one-on-one with State Treasurer Dan Rutherford, Republican candidate for governor, as we go in-depth on the issues and hear why he thinks one Republican candidate is behind recent efforts to sabotage his campaign. This runs about 35 minutes.
State Treasurer Dan Rutherford, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel.
Good, Terry. It's nice to be back with you. Thank you.
We want to get into a variety of the issues that you're running on and what you would do as governor. But first, as we tape this on February 6th, this is a Thursday, the preceding Friday, you had a press conference that was, I think, a little bit maybe confusing to some people. And rather than me restating what it was, why don't you just tell us what was that about?
Well, I hope it wasn't confusing. Very candidly, the general counsel of the Treasurer's office about a week before had gotten a communication from an attorney that was representing someone in the Treasurer's office that said there were certain allegations against the Treasurer. And so they went ahead and had a conference call the next day where the general counsel of the Treasurer's office and the outside attorney, labor attorney, listened to the attorneys for the accuser and went through certain allegations. That said, during that conversation, two attorneys heard the accuser's attorneys state that we can keep this under wraps. And when asked what the resolution to it was going to be, the statement was $300,000. This was brought to my attention. I said, well, this is inappropriate, number one. So then as the information from the accuser's attorney came forward, what the allegations were, what kind of information they had, and everyone looked at it, everyone internally looked at it, and there was no grounds at all. It was completely unsubstantiated. And that's when I said, you know, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going public. And we were very candid about it, that unfortunately, because of it being a personnel matter, can't identify who the accuser is or what the allegations are. Now, that makes it very complicated for me, particularly when you're 6 weeks out from an election. And I do believe in my heart of all hearts this was politically motivated. I think the timing of it was extremely intentional. I think Mr. Rauner and his team, because of many other things that are going on right now, is behind a lot of this stuff. And we now have brought on an external investigator, someone who is a retired federal agent with the Internal Revenue Service that is going through everything, just everything. And what I've asked them to do through the attorneys is if we could do this as expeditiously as possible, just because we want to get this resolved, but yet not at the expense of thoroughness. So that is what's happening right now, and we're going to be waiting for that report.
Do you have anything that ties, or why do you mention Bruce Rauner?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, the attorney for the accuser had done some work for his campaign. All right, nominal as it was. Number two, there is an external or an independent expenditure group that has already gone out after Congressman Aaron Schock to try to keep him out of the race, and it was widely believed that Mr. Rauner was behind that. Number two, there is now, today even, another outside group that's running ads against myself and the two other senators that are running, but doesn't even mention Mr. Rauner. He denies that he's involved with the two, but you just kind of say, really? You know, okay. You know, you've got reporter.
Have you looked into, I've seen those commercials.
Sure.
Have you looked at who's behind that group? Or?
Well, I haven't. It's an outside independent expenditure, and obviously because of the way the laws are written, you can't find out who's funding it. Also, when you have a Chicago television reporter asking me, he says, you know, do you care to comment? Are you aware the Rauner campaign is out trying to shop stories to the various Chicago media? I said, no, I'm not going to go there. But obviously, if you're asking the question, you know that that's what's going on. You know, you've got, you know, comments from others that suggest that Mr. Rauner has told his fundraising people that he's going to, quote, destroy his opponent. So all of those factors out there, in my opinion, I don't think there's any question, but it's politically motivated. I think the timing was intentional, and I think the gentleman's behind it.
If you believe that, and if Bruce Rauner were to be the Republican nominee, is he somebody you would be able to support?
We will go forward and cross those bridges when we get there. I intend to be the Republican nominee for governor.
I guess we'll leave it at that because we don't have anything else really substantially to say at this point. Let's move on to, you were in the House, you were in the Senate, you've been State Treasurer now for 4 years, you ran for Secretary of State
Sure.
A number of years ago. how in a broad sense, and then we'll get into specifics, but in the broad sense, how would a Governor Dan Rutherford change Illinois?
Well, I think the skill sets that I bring, first of all, are going to be important. One, I come from a family that's had a small business, worked as a young kid, had to shovel asphalt and make pizzas to pay my way through college. So I mean, it's one of those experiences in life that many people, young people particularly, have had, that understand the challenges of paying your way through university. The other is I've been 25 years at a private sector service master corporation, having been a VP, vice president of our international global expansion. So I've worked in countries of tremendous diversity, countries where Caucasians were the minority and Christianity was a minority. So my appreciation of negotiating contracts and being in countries and communities of great diversity, which is a significant part of what Illinois is. And the third is I actually have experience in the legislature, as you noted, having been a member of the House and of the Senate. So I am aware of the process, the personalities, the idiosyncrasies, and so forth. Those skill sets, I think, will lend myself to being a governor that's going to be for all of Illinois. I respect Chicago. I respect the state capital, Springfield. And I think having that kind of an approach and attitude will be helpful in the governor's office.
Actually, you were mentioning traveling. There was just some issue about the traveling and some people raising some comments about the traveling and whether or not that was appropriate.
Well, here, there's been,
on that?
as the state treasurer of Illinois, I've been on 3 official visits out of the country. None of it was paid for at taxpayer dollars. None of it. They were the Jewish group about learning more and being a part of understanding Israel and some of the efforts there. There was into China, which is an event that's done every single year. A delegation goes over every year, and they always ask to China, and they always ask some elected official or cabinet officer to help lead that delegation. I did that, and again, no taxpayer dollars involved, and I've been, I am an international business guy. I've been to China, a number of people in China, so it was kind of a effort with regards to Illinois businesses that are there, with regards to education facilities that have got liaisons between Illinois and China. And then the third one was to Korea. And that is done also every year within the region of the consulate, so it's multiple states. They pick one state a year to have a delegation go over. So while over there, I spoke at the pharmaceutical convention and met with Korean businesses that are looking to do business in Illinois and Illinois businesses there. So, I'm the treasurer of Illinois, and no taxpayer dollars were spent.
In fact, I remember you and I doing a brief interview down in Carbondale after you had returned from China,
right?
Talking about some of the contacts you had made at that time. And in fact, I think a lot of Illinoisans, not to make the case for you, but I find it fascinating. We hear so much about the downside of Illinois and the economy, and it's certainly struggling. But Illinois still is now in the 18th largest economy in the world. Mm-hmm. And if it were a nation, it would be part of the G20. I think people find that amazing, and
sure.
that I know from interviewing the Canadian ambassador, the #1 trading partner with Illinois is Alberta, Canada.
Right.
As far as building relationships. So let's just pick up that thread. In a larger context, to what extent, as governor, would you look to expand the Illinois economy, add jobs, vis-a-vis building trade relations with other nations?
Well, I would do it through my agencies, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Commerce, and those types of things, both from the export of commodities, which is important, but also value-added products. And the other thing that I don't know that a lot of people really understand, and that's where as governor I've got experience in it, is the idea of the exporting of technology and franchising. That is a non-tangible, but those are services that bring in revenue and cause jobs to happen here in Illinois. And having been in the real world private sector, having those experiences, I have that capability. The idea of outside companies doing investments here, we've seen that in the past. Here, as the governor of Illinois, I'm going to work particularly with small businesses here in Illinois. I mean, the overseas companies and opportunities for international here, I'm all about it, I'm all for it. But we really need to be focusing on what it means for our small and medium-sized companies here. So when the South Korean solar power panel plant manufacturing facility is looking at Indiana, Wisconsin, or Illinois, the idea of them being in Illinois, one employs people, which is good, but in addition to that, the suppliers that they use then would also be intended, and hopefully Illinois companies as well. So it's really understanding the multiple layers of how this benefits job creation here in our state.
And we might note your running mate is Steve Kim, who's
Right.
an attorney, but also is a Korean background.
You're right, he's a second-generation immigrant here. He's Korean-American, business lawyer, does a lot of work with the international community and bringing companies here and helping companies export. So Steve will be a significant partner in our efforts with regards to the job creation and retention.
To what extent did you pick him with
Sure.
that role in mind?
Well, the first priority for me was who could be what lieutenant governor could actually succeed me if I was incapacitated. That's the most important, what I felt needed to have. And as a reminder, this is the first time that we actually select our running mate to run as a team. The other is, who am I compatible with? Who can you talk to? Who can you agree to disagree? How do you work together? Steve Kim fit that bill. Then someone that's going to bring in a skill set that will help me navigate the bureaucracy of Illinois government to be of help to small and medium-sized companies, to help with the regulatory process. The Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, under my administration, Steve Kim, will be the director of the Governor's Office of Job Creation and Retention. Not a new office, it'll just take the resources of the Lieutenant Governor's office and have them be the ombudsman, the point of entry when there's issues that a company has to try to bring it in to try to navigate through the mire of bureaucracy there. So Steve will be a great partner for us.
Let's get into some of the other issues. There's both the fiscal and the social issues. How do you describe yourself just generically? I mean, are you a social conservative? Are you a social
I guess I'm probably socially
fiscal conservative?
Yeah,
What do you,
I'd say probably more fiscally conservative. I don't want to have any more money coming out of people's purses and wallets than they have to have. I'm also reasonable enough to understand that government services are essential. If managed properly, they can be efficient. I'm not the kind that I understand that there are needs that people have, whether it's drug addiction or health care and literacy type of assistance that we need to be cognizant of to be of assistance from our government.
So where we are right now, we just passed a reform of the pensions. That was one of the larger issues that we've had to deal with, and obviously it was one that was growing and increasingly eating up a part of the state budget that was blocking out our ability to pay for other things like education and transportation, etc. On those reforms, what is your take? Are you happy with the reforms as they were passed? And if not, what would you have done?
The bill itself, I don't think was constitutional. Okay, so let's just start with that. And
now, why would you?
Well, because I don't think that there was consideration and acceptance. And I think that's the principles of what you have to pass the constitutional muster. Now, we're going to find out. The Supreme Court will ultimately rule, and then I'll deal with that when I'm the governor in January 2015. Either it's constitutional or it's not. The issue, I think, that's going to be before me, if it's not constitutional, is everything's going to be on the table. If somebody says, well, should you change the retirement age? Well, it depends what you do with the other stuff. Increase COLA or decrease COLA. Depends on what you do with the other stuff. Health care, contributions. So, as I said to you, Terry, earlier on in your program here, I negotiated contracts. And the one thing I learned in doing that is you just don't put one thing out there and agree to it and hope the rest of it's going to come along. You have to put together a comprehensive package of these. So, if it's not constitutional, everything's going to be on the table. I will be the guy negotiating, unlike this governor who abdicated that responsibility to the leadership of the General Assembly. The stakeholders will be at the table. The public employee unions will be at the table. Management and business groups will be at the table. We're going to have to close the door and actually have some hard discussions. But when it is finally done, I will be looking at a bill that will be constitutional, which gives consideration and acceptance.
There's two aspects as I look at the economy of Illinois and our reputation. And of course, it's a bad reputation right now around the country for a variety of reasons. One, because the last two governors had gone, Rod Blagojevich and George Ryan went to prison. So obviously that sets a bad tone. So the one is, what are the fiscal policies that would be changed to increase the business climate, to increase jobs, to build the economy and have more tax revenues coming into the state? The other is, how do we address both the real and the perceived level of corruption within the state that if you are trying to attract new businesses to the state, one wonders why they would come to Illinois if the tax policies aren't what they want, and if they think that they're going to be shaken down every time they have to get some kind of piece of regulation approved.
Sure. Well, the tax policy is a significant part of a company's decision on where to locate, both income tax, property taxes, and fees involved with it. There's no doubt about it. But adding to that, now I don't diminish that, but adding to that, there are many other factors that a company looks at, either to expand while they're here or to do a location in our state. Part of that will be the workers' comp structure and the unemployment insurance. But in addition to that will be job training, skilled workforce, access to infrastructure, whether it's the trunk lines for internet, whether it is rail spurs, whether it is highway access, airports. It'll be on, as I said earlier, training, for the workforce to be able to be properly trained in whatever that service or goods company is. So I think that by Governor of Illinois recognizing those things, in particular the utilization of our community colleges for the training programs for companies, and then what we need to have with regards to the hard infrastructure are going to be things I'll be looking at to be of assistance to a company that's going to look to expand or to locate here.
What about ethically? Or do we need to do anything different ethically? Is it just better the state is corrupt as people tend to think it is?
No, it's not. It's I don't know how many more laws we can put on the books. I mean, we've got all the laws that you can put on the books. I think it's just going to take people that are going to have the right heart and right intent to do the right thing. And where there is some violation, they should be prosecuted and prosecuted severely.
When you become governor, right at that point, unless something changes, the tax increase that was put on there temporarily is going to go off, which means the governor that comes in January of 2015 will soon find that he's another, pick a number, $6 or $7 billion behind where we are as of today.
Right.
And even today we're racking up more and more unpaid debt. So are you in favor of keeping the tax increase? And if not, how do we make the economy of Illinois work?
I know I'm going to get beat up by some of my opponents, but I'm going to be honest and candid. I don't want that income tax increase to stay. All right, so everybody got that? I don't want it to stay. That said, I don't know what I'm going to have to deal with in the next year with everything out there today. Will the state public pension bill be constitutional or not? I don't think it will be. Where are they going to be at with regards to the spending patterns between the next year and when I become the governor? So you put all of that out there. I don't want that income tax increase to stay, but I may need to have some form of revenue as a part of the mix on how we put Illinois back on a financially sound footing. And whatever that may mean, temporary, part of, piece, something else. I may need some revenue. But what I will tell you as your governor, I will not sign into law anything for revenue that is not a part of a comprehensive, verifiable, auditable, whatever terms you want to use, package that puts us in the right stead to move forward. See, I think where Governor Quinn made his mistake on the income tax increase was in January 2011 when he signed it into law. All he did was bring in money. The outstanding bills in January of 11 was $8.5 billion. Income tax increase went into effect. 2 years later, January 2013, the outstanding bills was $9 billion. So you see, it didn't resolve the problem. It just brought in money and didn't resolve the problem. So I will put everything out there, where are we at on the pensions, where are we at on spending, where are we at on revenue. And I'm also a state treasurer that's been able to cut his general revenue budget by 2% first year, 3% second year, and this year I'm cutting it by 5%, a total of 10% without harming the standards of performances of that office. So I've been through it as a constitutional officer. Everything will need to be on the table.
Would you go for a temporary extension of that then, or I mean, what if the legislature said we want to make it permanent? If you were the new governor, would you veto that?
Under the current rate and where it's at today?
Yeah.
I would be I want to be sensitive. If they come in and said where it is today, we want to make it permanent, I would veto it. With that, then we're going to say let's lay everything out there. Where are we at? We've got to get the expenditures in line. And we have to deliver services, essential services only, not to be duplicated, not to be provided for inappropriate recipients, and have then figure out where we are and determine what we can cut back, and then see what we have to do with regards to revenue.
And when you go out, and as you've been campaigning for quite some time already, you must hear from all kinds of people who are
Sure.
small business people or corporate business people. What is it that they're telling you that they want to have changed? Doug Oberhelman, who runs Caterpillar Tractor, one of the largest employers in the state, said not too long ago that when they were looking to build a new plant, he said Illinois wasn't even in the running as far as consideration, so I think they put it in the Carolinas. If we want to have jobs, we obviously want to change that. What are you being told? So it's
Sure.
not just obviously some of what you're proposing, I would think, is an amalgam of what you hear from
It is.
people in the business community.
It
So
is.
what is it that you're hearing that we need to change?
Well, and with all respect to the trophy companies, they're important. I want to keep all the trophy companies here, and I want to bring the trophy companies in. But ultimately, where I'm going to be focusing on as the governor is going to be small and medium-sized business, because they are the ones that really dramatically employs more people in this state than the trophy companies, and they aren't the ones that's going to be able to say, well, you know what, I'm going to pick up and walk away. They've got their business here. It's hard for them to do that. So how do we make it so that they are going to be comfortable here, that they're going to be able to add the 1, 2, and 3 more people in the employees of their small business? That's where we're going to put the economy back on stead here. And I go back to what I said at the earlier part of our show, the 3 areas that I'm going to be involved with. I'm going to be appointing, I was talking about Steve Kim, so I didn't give you the 3 points, I'm sorry. One is I'm going to be appointing directors of state agencies that are going to be doing their job, but then they're also going to do everything they can to create a job and retain a job, not be the barrier to a job. And that's the regulatory side of things. 2,
and by what would you do there? Speed up the regulatory process, cut regulation? Or what?
Well, part of it is where they're responding, where you've got a regulator that's going out and saying, and this happens up in Stevenson County, an agriculture facility I visited there. They produce eggs, and they have the new equipment ready to bring online. And the inspector came in and said, okay, here are the 2 or 3, 4 things, whatever it was you need to do. And they said, okay, fine, got them all done. Long time later, the regulator comes back and said, okay, those are done. Now here's 3 or 4 or 5 more. Now that just isn't, that's not efficient. And so now we've delayed it once again. They become frustrated. So that's where, number 2, my lieutenant governor is going to be in charge of the governor's office of job creation and retention, as I explained to you earlier. And then number 3, I'm going to be the chief marketing officer. I'm going to be the guy that's going out there, that's going to work with the South Korean solar power panel plant manufacturer that's looking at Indiana, Wisconsin, or Illinois, and work with them. I'm going to entertain them for dinner at the governor's mansion in Springfield. I mean, that's what you do in business, and it's not too dissimilar to what you should do in the government realm as well.
On education, I talk to people in education, and on one hand, they've been having their budget cut. Now, some people say it should be cut. What are your thoughts on education? And within that, George Ryan was, I'll be the education governor, 51 cents of every new revenue goes to education. But people have criticized that by saying, what's the point of adding new money if you don't hold people accountable for the product?
Sure.
So relative to that, what are you going to do on education, if anything?
Well, when you say education, that's a whole big spectrum of stuff, K through 12. I happen to be a supporter of pre-K. The early childhood. I think that's an area to help, the K through 12. I see that as an investment that we need to be looking at. And then the other spectrum of it is with regards to furthering education. And I don't mean just our 4-year universities, which are important, but I also mean vocational technical training. I also mean access and use through our community college system. So I see those 2 ends of it as very important to be a part of the continuum of education that we need to invest in. Should more money go there? That's going to have to be a discussion for allocation and looking at the returns you get. As will be the same discussion with regards to assistance with those with developmental disabilities, with mental illness, public safety, nuclear safety. See where I'm going? These are all the things I'm going to have to deal with as the governor that need to be laid out, put together within the resources available. And I will tell you, though, education will be one of those that I'm looking to have as the top of my list.
Just to run through a couple of our issues, because time's always our enemy, but on minimum wage, which is
Sure.
one of the things that Governor Quinn is wishing to propose, do you support what he's doing? And as we take this, the Alderman of Chicago, not that they run the state, but the Alderman of Chicago just passed a resolution saying the minimum wage in Illinois ought to be $10.65 an hour. What are your thoughts on setting a minimum wage?
Well, here, I'm for every Illinoisan to make as much money as possible. Okay, I'm for that, legally and ethically. I also am not in favor of lowering the minimum wage. Now we are where we are today. I believe that raising the minimum wage at this time will not be helpful or beneficial. My intent is to work so that people, as your governor, that minimum wage jobs will not be the issue, that there's going to be opportunities out there. The minimum wage is not, not where people are going to be. And the idea of raising minimum wage, I would want to have it be a discussion that what do we do to help create jobs and retain jobs, and what do we need to do to make it less burdensome for people to do that, and then a discussion of minimum wage could be a part of that mix.
One other thing that's going around, there's always a variety of issues, but one of them is term limits, and
Sure.
and people, I hear it across the board. I mean, it's not tied to any one party. What are your thoughts on term limits?
Sure.
And, well, I'll leave it at that.
I support term limiting the leadership of the General Assembly. I support term limiting the time that a person can serve as the Speaker of the House or the President of the Senate. I think that in itself is a part of the issues that need to be dealt with. The other is I strongly support the Fair Map Amendment, which basically says that the drawing of the political boundaries for legislators will be done by an independent body as opposed to for self-preservation, incumbency protection. I think that will ultimately get to where we're trying to go with that, and I support those two concepts.
And just for the viewers, right now, the parties, whoever wins the draw of the hat, can draw the map. So it's the parties control that, and you again want to have someone who's independent,
Absolutely,
not related to the parties.
right, because it's gotten to the point of again, for self-preservation, for incumbency, and I think that lends itself to people just getting reelected. Now, I also happen to think that if you've got a local legislator that you think is doing the best job for you and they earn the right to get reelected, so be it. But have a map that's going to be fair for competition to be able to enter.
I know you're a busy man, and you got other things to do. But one thing, when you ran for Secretary of State, one of the things that you would champion, and I actually thought it was something that needed to be championed, was to use technology. And
Sure.
anyone in the private sector, or if we look at the private sector, any worker out there knows the computers they're using, the software that they are constantly having to learn. The private sector has done great strides in increasing the productivity, so any one worker can do a lot more than they did 20 years ago.
Sure.
But not in government. It's
Well,
almost
not-
as if we have a technological moat around government. I mean, and I know Julie Hamos, who runs DCFS, that she was testifying that they were using 30-year-old computers, and yet they spend billions and billions of dollars.
Right.
In a separate interview I did, there was a woman who was saying that there's massive fraud in programs like Medicaid because the state can't cross-reference whether or not someone is even a citizen of Illinois,
Right.
much less whether they're sitting in one of our prisons as they're putting in applications to be compensated. Given your stance on technology, have you?
Well, I think
would
that
be
sure, and I think the example is what I've done in the State Treasurer's Office. I mean, we have gone in and upgraded the computer systems. Now, part of this got to be done by budgeting. It's price and cost, and when you do it with everything else. But then it's also rewriting the programs. We've done a tremendous rewrite of the ePay program, and it was kind of pushing a noodle up the rope kind of program, but we finally got it done. So, these are things that can be done, and it's what you look at in a company as an investment because you got greater efficiencies as you progress.
How old are the computers that you're using in the Treasurer's office?
No, I want to be careful on the answers to it. But the laptops are one thing. I'm talking about the main infrastructure run the books. They are reasonable. They are reasonable, and we've been phasing in the new stuff as we've been in the office now 3 years.
And who decides that? I mean, as treasurer, do you have to go to the governor's office to get an allocation, or can you do that?
Well, it's an appropriation. The General Assembly appropriates the funds for all the constitutional officers, and within those appropriations, I then have the resources to do and plan out over the years what we need to do.
Lastly, I was just interviewing I think a mutual friend, Dick Lockhart, who's been covering and been a lobbyist for 60 years. He just turned 90. And we were talking about how before he was governor, Ogilvie was the Republican sheriff of Cook County. You used to have the 3-member districts so that the
cumulative voting
Republicans in Chicago. Today, Illinois is far more democratically controlled, at least the power structure.
Mm-hmm.
How does the Republican Party change that, and how would you, as governor, try to get some of your Republican policies passed, or otherwise you're going to have to be you just seem to be going to be at a stalemate with the Democratic leadership?
Sure. Well, I think it's by being a reasonable Republican. I think it's one that's going to be able to understand and appreciate that Chicago deserves its fair share, but so does Chinoa. And that I think is, without being a parochial governor, in fact, I think at times we've seen the past few governors being extremely parochial. They've been very Chicago centrist. And by having a governor that appreciates Chicago and don't find it as the evil city, and yet being able to work with them and do the other things we need to do in other parts of the state will be a part of it. And I think too is driving policies that are going to be reasonable and fair. So understanding the diversity of this wonderful state with regards to ethnicity, with regards to religion, ideology, and that's in part, significant part, how I was able to be elected treasurer of the state of Illinois.
When you hear a guy, and we'll close out 2 last questions, I'll let you have the last word. But
okay.
When you hear a guy like Rauner, Bruce Rauner, who's running, saying that he's going to turn Springfield upside down, from your experience, do we need an outsider like that? Would something like that work? And I know you're going to have a bias because you're in your mind going to be the nominee. But can an outsider come in and bring in a different idea that's going to fly? Or
well, here, let me just.
What's your read on that?
Here, a governor is not king of the forest. A governor is not a dictator. A governor in the private is not the CEO of this enterprise called free democracy and co-equal branches of government. So the attitude of how you need to work with consensus, understanding that there is a co-equal branch of government, and you don't want to be necessarily conciliatory, but you also need to be working together for the common good. I think that type of an attitude is what you need to have as your governor.
And then last word, as we go to the election and the primary coming up in March, why should the Republican voters pick Dan Rutherford?
Number one, I'm the only Republican running for governor in the state of Illinois that's actually been able to win. The other is the fact that I've got the skill sets of being in the private sector, and I've got the skill set of having been a member of the General Assembly. And my number one, top priority, is how we put more people back to work. I'll protect your wallet. I'll protect your wallet, and it's all about jobs.
All right, State Treasurer Dan Rutherford,
thank you, Terry.
For joining us.
Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.